I'm Professor Stephen Dyson.
And I'm Professor Jeff Dudas.
And we are here today to discuss the merits and the themes of two Michael Mann movies, Heat and Collateral. This is part of our retrospective on Mann, and we've been endeavouring to find the best Michael Mann movie and sort of exploring what seems to drive his cinema along the way. Heat and Collateral, these were matchups that were sort of randomly determined, but they have actually thrown together two heavyweights here, two really sort of well-regarded Michael Mann movies. Heat carries a 84% Rotten Tomatoes score from the critics and a 94% audience score, so actually significantly better regarded by the audience and the critics. That can mean two things, I think. One would be that there just is that divergence, right, between the popular and the sort of critical reception. The other time that happens is if a movie kind of, the reception to it changes over time, right? Because the reviews are going to come out when the movie first comes out, and if it later grows in stature, the audience is going to represent that. And I think that's probably what's happened with Heat. Then Collateral has an 86% critic score and an 84% audience score, so they're pretty well matched in terms of Rotten Tomatoes. But how are they matched in terms of what we think about them? You want to start with Heat?
Sure.
Okay, so why don't you give me your take, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Okay, so Heat I saw in the theater when it was first released. So, and then I had not seen it, I had not rewatched it in its entirety until now. Seen flashes, bits and pieces here and there.
Memes.
Yeah. Yes, memes, which I guess we probably will talk about a little bit. So I was rewatching it, not with new eyes, but with relatively new eyes, I think this time. And it is what it is advertised as, and it is, I think, what it has come to be seen retrospectively, which is a sort of bravura showdown between two historically great actors of their generation, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. And I think the movie is also interesting in that it offsets those actors' performances with what were in the mid-90s, a kind of a generation of actors who were kind of, if not up and coming, pretty well established. So people like Ashley Judd and Val Kilmer and Michael McKean, all people who were pretty well regarded and pretty high up, I suppose, in the industry. And so it was a kind of a blockbuster movie, and it was a blockbuster movie in a way that I think Michael Mann's later movies become like that. You can tell that Mann himself is growing in stature and prestige within the industry because the casts are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so I think the movie does a really effective job of spotlighting those characters. You had said off screen that you think that Heat is successful in a way that some of the other Mann movies maybe are not quite as successful because they offer full explorations of all of their characters.
I think to a remarkable degree, to a degree that is a pinnacle, almost as good as it's possible to do that. It's just incredible if you think of how fully drawn even the quote-unquote peripheral characters are. Like, there's a whole world here, and the movie is, to me, so efficient in its use of sort of screen time, and so skillful in its portrayal of not only who these people are and giving them plausible ways to interact with each other, but also the degree to which they represent like quite important sort of philosophical principles. I find it incredible. I mean, I was blown away rewatching by how skillful it is on precisely that point.
Yeah, I mean, think of a character like the young Natalie Portman, right? Who's another, like, I'm not sure. I think this may have been one of her first big roles. But I'm not certain of that. But, even her character is pretty fully drawn.
I feel like her dad, who we never see,
is also,
I know a lot about.
Right. Yeah, and so I think that this is up to this point maybe the most successful of Michael Mann's movies in using those kinds of elliptical information drops that he likes to do as revelations of backstory or revelations of character. They work here. I think in other movies, they don't always work, particularly the earlier ones. It doesn't always work very well. And you're left I'm thinking of, well, this is a later movie. I'm thinking of Ferrari, for example, in which it's really hard to understand like who these characters are and what's driving them or motivating them, or even Last of the Mohicans, I think suffers from the same thing. But here, that kind of elliptical information drop, I think, is effective and it works. And so I think it's a good movie. I do. I don't know that this is, I wouldn't consider this to be a compulsively watchable movie. I know that this is a movie for some people that they consider it a touchstone. They return to it over and over and over again. I don't see it in that way. And I don't see either of Pacino or De Niro's performances as the kinds of performances that are legacy defining for their careers.
I think I totally disagree. I think it is that touchstone movie. I think it's, for one thing, it's a culmination point for Mann. You know, there are a lot of his themes that are in that movie, themes particularly from Thief and Manhunter. So from Thief, the notion of the very precise kind of, master criminal who's fully drawn and who has a code and is operating in a world that is no more moral and very frequently much less moral. The legit world is much less moral than the illicit world of the kind of master criminal who's trying to find a way to sort of reconcile the criminal pursuit, but also just the human pursuit of a way of existing in a corrupt world with the difficulties that he's confronted with, and he's trying to ultimately find a way out, trying to find a way to transcend the corruption that surrounds him to build a proper existence for himself. You've got the parallels in Manhunter between Vincent Hanna and Will Graham, and the degree to which, to one extent, the kind of legitimate system throws up an antibody to the illegitimate, and that's what's really going on with with De Niro and Pacino, with Neil McCauley and Vincent Hanna, or in Manhunter, it's what was going on between the Tooth Fairy and Will Graham, or even between Lecter and Will. Although Lecter's a more liminal kind of boundary crossing figure. So you've got that going on, but also the cost that imposes on these individuals, the degree to which Graham and Hannah both kind of have to become what it is they're pursuing in order to get the drop or sort of win ultimately. So you got those things going on, and then in Heat, I think you just have wider things that actually push it beyond, certainly beyond Thief and arguably beyond Manhunter. You've got the degree to which the whole world is built that I was alluding to, but I think it's not, I think you were portraying it in terms of, it's really good. He got some great character actors together and got like nice performances out of them and all the rest of it. I think it's so skillful that it lends a verisimilitude to the world, that it allows it to make sort of broader philosophical points about, the degree to which you can have a plan in your life versus you're just subject to random chaos. The coursing of streams of evil through societies that just lay latent but can erupt at any point. The question of whether there's any real morality in the world, or it's all just kind of chance, or there's any real human ability to be a sort of straight shooter, or everything is just corruption and everyone's very kind of atomized and individualistic and out for themselves. And just sort of great transcendent themes like the theme of time. How transient is life. And life is shown as transient in Heat in many different ways. And the degree to which some of the characters actually recognize this. Neil recognizes he's got no time, right? He's got 30 seconds and has to be willing to abandon anything in 30 seconds, lives his life on a clock, and it's the clock by which the police are pursuing him. But also Vincent's character is constantly saying, I'm out of time, I've got no time. He also is aware that he's in a transient moment. And how do you live a life in transient moments? Is it worth trying to hold on to anything?
Yes, I think those are all sharp insights and points. The other parallel that I really picked up on between the Vincent Hanna and the Neil McCauley character is that they're both portrayed as patriarchs in their own way. They're sort of workplace crew patriarchs.
Yes.
They're both clearly the father figures of the people who are around them, although they are either dysfunctional or just non-existent in actual paternal relationships and sort of the more conventional ones. So, and they both sort of are looked upon in that way by the sort of the family or the team over whom they exercise some authority and some moral authority. And so that struck me as a sort of an interesting counterpoint to the ideas that you're just raising about an atomized world in which everybody is just sort of left to themselves and kind of out on their own. I think that's a little more complicated in what Mann is offering, in which, there's the 30 seconds, right? De Niro says this over and over again. You've got to be willing to drop everything at, when you see the heat coming around the corner in 30 seconds. But he actually doesn't do that, right? And he never does that. It's not just with the Amy Brenneman character that he is disinclined from doing that. He never really does that, right? And this ends up being his downfall, right? He doesn't give up on Chris, right? He sort of, when he probably should, right? Chris is clearly a liability. The Val Kilmer character is clearly a liability who should be cut free, but he doesn't, right? And it becomes a real problem for him. He should absolutely allow Waingro to go, right? But he won't. And why won't he? Because Waingro is the person who's responsible, essentially, for destroying Macaulay's family.
Well, yes, and that of course is the fatal mistake, right? There's that great scene where Neil and Evie are going to leave and they're free, and Neil actually passes through a tunnel and he's bathed in light, and you can see he's free,
right? And
then he re-enters the darkness on the other side of the tunnel, and then he's like,
But this is the other thing, right? This is the other thing that he doesn't actually leave behind. I mean, to leave everything behind in 30 seconds also means that you leave behind the life of crime, right? Which he won't do either. So, and I think so. He's a character, and this is maybe the difference between, to the extent that I think you're quite right that the Pacino and the De Niro characters are imagined as dark twins. But the one big difference seems to be that De Niro cannot leave behind. He can't take his own advice, whereas Pacino, can, right? Like he saves his sort of stepdaughter
and then leaves her in the hospital. Yeah,
right. And he's okay with doing that,
right? But don't you think there's a broader point being made here, right? Which is the sort of impossibility of having secure attachments in a transient world full of incompetence and full of evil, right? Because what goes on is Vincent is able to leave he does successfully leave the transient attachment, and he kills Neil, right? So Neil makes the choice you think is the humanist choice, right? Which is, in the end, or he's not able to successfully leave stuff behind either because he's kind of killed. So Neil ends up dead. Vincent ends up effectively alone. So he wins by being alone. But neither of them are able to form successful.
But Neil's making
long-term establishments.
Right. They're both making choices, but Neil is clearly making choices here. Right. He's not fated to do the things that he does, I don't think. Right.
Well, or is he? I mean, I think that's a question the movie is asking.
Multiple points at which he'd make opposite choices, and I think in each of those moments he is shown as, there's tends to be a fixation, a close up on his face, clearly with the idea that we're supposed to be understanding that he is weighing a decision, which he makes. And I would have to go back and watch more closely again, but I did not get that sense from the Vincent Hanna character. It seems more instinctual.
He's more compulsive
more compulsive, less. There seems to be less kind of weighing of options. He seems to be less burdened by the sort of the internal drive or instinct that he has, right, to just be constantly chasing, right? So I think there may be some differences there. I think they're maybe not facsimiles of each other.
Yeah, well, so Vincent is indisciplined, right? And I think that's because he's coming from the legit side of society. So he's able to be indisciplined and kind of careen around the place and doing the memeable things, very loud. And he's able to do that because he's the policeman, right? So he's from the legit side of society. Whereas Neil has to be quiet and disciplined. And he's much more kind of successful in that, at least initially, and has been for a long time, because he's from the criminal world. And if he's not in discipline, I mean, what's his face? John Voight's character says it explicitly. He says, Vincent only has to hit, this guy only has to hit once. Right. You can never miss. You have to hit every time. And that's the difference in discipline, but neither of them are able to solve that conundrum, right? They have to adopt different strategies to be able to successfully exist in the world, but the world does not allow them to exist. You know, Neil has a very disciplined life, and into it is thrown by fate the sadist Waingro. That is the start of things just blowing up. He's able to handle everything else. He's able to handle Chris and the rest of the characters because he's like a good manager and so forth. And he's found people who have talents that he needs, and he's worked around their weaknesses to try and keep the whole thing together. But Waingro is the one that blows it up.
Right. Yeah, there's an element of chaos, I see. You know, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
You know, and it's Neil's ultimate downfall is that he becomes undisciplined, right?
But in pursuit of a different existence for himself, right? Which I think the movie is saying it's impossible to
I think no,
square that circle.
But I think the downfall is not the decision to go off with Edie. The downfall is his decision to not let Waingro go. Right? I mean, they're out. He's out. Right? The everything is arranged. You know, here the disciplined choice is to get out, not to refuse human connection, right? The disciplined choice is to embrace human connection, and he makes the opposite choice.
Okay, so let me try this on you then. I think the movie is telling us something important here, which is it's were Neil to have left Waingro, maybe Neil doesn't understand this, but Neil would have left an element not of noble criminality, but of perhaps even supernatural sadism.
Maybe.
Right? So that world, Neil's world, has thrown up Neil, disciplined, moral, within the context of, you know, as an antibody to Waingro, who is chaotic, indisciplined, serial killer. And the legit world is not capable of solving the Waingro problem, right? They have no idea that they're only starting to realize there's even a serial killer in their midst. And Vincent has no interest in it, right? He spends zero time actually trying to solve that. His interest in Waingro would only be to the extent that he can get the target that he's, you know, monotonously focused on, which is Neil. So Neil solves that problem. Neil rids the world of that evil. And I'd said to you offline that if you rewatch this movie in light of having recently watched Manhunter, you can see what I think are fairly deliberate references to Waingro as a sort of Tooth Fairy-esque character.
Yeah.
He makes a similar pose to the one the Tooth Fairy makes when Graham shoots the Tooth Fairy. He has a winged beast of some kind, or wings on his chest, the tattoo. And the last thing Neil says to him is, "Look at me." And looking and seeing was the whole Graham Tooth Fairy connection in Manhunter. And I think Mann is telling us something here about the sort of nature of evil and how he wanted those movies perhaps to be, or those parts of those movies to be read in parallel. So what Neil's done there is he hasn't made a selfish choice of I have to exact revenge, maybe unwittingly, but in the mythology of the movie, what he's actually done is solved a problem that's a problem from his world that the legitimate world can't solve.
Yeah.
Which makes him a sort of more noble character in the end.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about Mann's desire to portray both of these characters as noble in their own ways. And they're both sort of anti-heroes in that way. Yeah. So should we talk about Collateral?
Yes, Collateral. Okay. So Collateral is Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of this movie, I like this movie. I think you might be a little higher on it than I am. To me, it's a tougher watch in the aftermath of Heat than it would be if Heat didn't exist. I do think there's, if Heat is for me a pinnacle point of Mann, and it takes some of the themes that in two other movies I'd really like, Thief and Manhunter, and sort of, you know, takes them to a pinnacle point. Collateral is a little bit after the Lord Mayor's show. Some of the same things are going on. You know, you've got a crafty criminal in Vincent. He's even called Sam. You know, it's a strange connection, but it's called Vincent, like Al Pacino's character was, Tom Cruise's character, who goes around the place doing technique-y things. You know, and in service of a criminal enterprise. I suppose the new character is Jamie Foxx's kind of working man taxi driver. I think that the degree to which this movie works for you, I think depends upon like how much are you going to buy Tom Cruise's character? Maybe Cruise in that character, or the degree to which that character is compelling. At its height, you'd say, well, or if you were to take the the upside here, you'd say it's a different character for Cruise to play.
Yeah,
right.
No, I mean, I think Cruise is good
Okay.
in this movie, and I do think that Tom Cruise's more cartoonish elements in some of his roles over the years have obscured the fact that he is actually a capable thespian.
Yeah.
And I think he's capable of portraying more range than I would say that he's given credit for, but I actually think it's because of a lot of his choices, his franchise choices, and some of the, as he's aged, in particular, some of the decisions that he's made about the roles that he's going to invest himself in do lend themselves to a more of a kind of cartoonish public image. So I think he's kind of responsible for some of this, but he has had some really superb, I think, really superb performances as an actor. This is kind of in that register rather than in the kind of the action hero register, I think. And I do think there's some really effective scenes in this movie, again, in the dialogues between Max, our cabbie driver, and Vincent, our assassin, in which Cruise does a really good job of conveying in just how broken and dysfunctional he is as a character, as a human being, in ways that I think are sort of the best version of Mann's kind of what I was talking about earlier is the elliptical information drop and the sort of character development. I think there's some really effective scenes, and for the both of them, right? Both the Max character and the Vincent character, I think we get a really full-bodied understanding of who these people are in this movie. I do think I kind of like, and maybe this is just the conceit of the structure, but I did like the kind of the 5 assassinations and the way that the movie had a kind of obvious and clear momentum and structure.
The premise, so the negative way to say that would be the premise really dominates the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I guess that could be a negative way to say it. But to me, the positive of that is that it gives the movie a structure and a momentum and a clarity and a transparency that could potentially dissolve, it in other hands, right? Or without that structure.
And it's sort of a journey through the night, which is going to like suit Michael Mann.
Yeah.
And an obvious, like, here are some tasks to perform, and then the thing will be over.
And I do think, and I think you may disagree with this a little bit, I do think that the Max character is a slightly different kind of character for a Michael Mann movie. Much more of the kind of the everyman. I think he's much more relatable than most of the Michael Mann characters who, I mean, as you have said a couple of times in this series, tend to be archetypes rather than full-bodied people. You could imagine running into somebody like Max, right? You could imagine that life, right? A life of kind of frustrated ambitions, a perfectionist who, is really afraid of failing and is so afraid of failing, in fact, that he refuses to engage himself and his opportunities in ways that could lead him to his potential. And that what happens over the course of this story or of this movie is that meeting somebody like Vincent clarifies all of the kinds of insecurities and dysfunctions that Max has, and they eventually lead him to throw the caution to the wind here in a multitude of ways, which end up being, I think it's clear that by the end of the movie, we understand that this has been a transformational night, right, for Max, and not just for the obvious kind of trauma reasons, but because it's the sort of circumstance that seems to have propelled him or forced him into engaging the world in a way that he was simply afraid to do so before. Yeah. And I do think that's a different kind of character.
Sure. So I don't dislike the character or the movie. To me, it is different in some ways, but there are also obvious continuations from the character of Frank Thief, who was also a working class person who also, was thinking small and had his life kind of under control, and then is kind of compelled, but actually with disastrous results, to kind of think larger. And also just down to even smaller things. You remember Frank used to carry around like this montage of what his ideal life would be, and Max has this kind of picture of the island. So there's that kind of dreaming or envisioning kind of a life beyond yourself. I do think there's a clear philosophy in in Collateral as well. I agree. I hadn't quite put it as succinctly as you. I thought about it as coherently as you. That there's this kind of take your opportunities or throw yourself into the world, because the things are not just going to come to your door. You have to be agentic in your life. There's also a sort of broader philosophy of kind of disconnection and atomization. Like all of our societies are atomized.
Right.
If you're on the train for 6 hours, no one will notice you're dead.
Right.
But then the other things Vincent says about,
And LA, by the way, is a great backdrop.
Sure.
For that point.
Right, exactly. Why do you care about this person I just killed? You don't know him, and you also don't know anyone in Rwanda where there's a genocide, and the world is sort of broadly indifferent to the fate of individual humans. So don't get so excited about the stuff that I'm doing. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
So all that stuff I think is very compelling to me. It's not only Cruise. It's not only that I didn't 100% buy Cruise, in that role, in terms of the sort of broader performance stuff. There were just maybe this is just too shallow or simple-minded of me. I kept getting thrown out of the movie by the kind of wiggy nature.
Yeah,
like that hair looks
the hair is
ridiculous.
weird. I agree. Yeah.
Like no one has gray hair like that with perfectly symmetrical. Like that's just not how people. That's an obviously.
It to not be the way that.
So maybe
human hair grace.
Exactly. So maybe he's wearing a disguise, and then I was like, that doesn't look like Tom Cruise's real stubble, and it's also perfectly salt and pepper in the way the hair is perfectly salt.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I don't know, like it's just a bit wiggy. Was my thought. And I kept thinking, I don't know, you look actually quite strange, and I think you should probably try and or you should look strange in a different way. The other comparison that I kept thinking of was, what's he called? Anton Chigurh? Is that the guy's name in No Country for Old Men?
Yep.
Who has a similar.
By the way, Javier Bardem is of course in this movie.
Yes, of course. But Chigurh has a similar sort of. Almost similar philosophy and a similar kind of role in the movie of just and this is my business, but he's off kilter in a way that somehow draws you more into that world and his sort of indifference. If that's the comparison,
No Country for Old Men versus Collateral, it's a blowout.
Okay.
All
right.
Not in favor of Collateral.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe we should do we should pick a winner here, and then maybe take a short break and conclude actually our Michael Mann movie series, and see if one of these movies is our overall winner, and have some concluding reflections. But in terms just of the shootout, Heat versus Collateral, where are you coming down?
It's a close call.
Okay.
I mean, I know for you, I can tell it's not. Yeah. But for me, it's a close call. I would put it like this. I think Heat is likely a better movie, but I actually enjoyed watching Collateral more.
Okay.
And if I were going to return to a movie, it would be Collateral probably, and not Heat. But
the premise is, which is the best Michael Mann movie?
Yeah.
So you're...
I mean, it's probably, I think it's a close call, but I would probably go with Heat.
Okay. I would go with Heat pretty convincingly, as I think is no great surprise to you. So I think we're advancing Heat from this matchup. Yep. All right. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we will come back with our final results. And this has been the last in a series of knockout videos that we've done, where we've paired Michael Mann movies one against the other, and we will talk about those movies that still remain and then rank them in our grand finale. So stay tuned. And we are back with the grand finale of our reconsideration of Michael Mann, what we've been calling the Michael Mann movie tournament. What you've just seen, the Heat versus Collateral showdown, was the last of a series of randomly determined paired matchups where we've taken the 8 highest rated Michael Mann movies and kind of picked a winner from each round, and now we're in the grand finale. So in episode 1 we had Thief versus The Insider, and we somewhat controversially, we were split on this, but we advanced Thief. In episode 2 we had, was it Ferrari versus Manhunter?
Yeah.
So we had Ferrari versus Manhunter, and without much difficulty, we advanced Manhunter. In episode 3, we had Ali versus Last of the Mohicans. Close the call, but we advanced Last of the Mohicans, and we just advanced Heat versus Collateral. So Thief, Manhunter, Last of the Mohicans, Heat.
Yep.
Why don't we try and determine a kind of 4-1 and see if we see if we're on the same page? What are we putting in slot number 4? What do you think? The 4th best Michael Mann movie.
I think it's probably Last of the Mohicans.
Okay.
For me.
Okay.
But it's closer than I would like.
Okay. All right. So I think Last of the Mohicans fairly clearly, Last of the Mohicans are sort of engaging historical epic. I think we said its major major interest to us as we were considering Michael Mann movies, reconsidering Michael Mann movies, was just the degree to which it was a thematic and stylistic departure for him. But I think we were a little down on the degree to which it became a sort of romantic, windswept epic.
Yeah.
And some of the kind of craft elements were lost.
Yeah. And for my part, in Lost in the Mohicans, the thing that was disappointing for me was the sort of systematic departure from the source material in a way that was perhaps effective for a mainstream Hollywood movie, but quite disastrous for the kind of mythic power of the story in American culture.
Okay. So, in position number 4, Last of the Mohicans. Slot number 3. Do you want me to give my one?
Give your 3. Yeah,
okay. So my number 3 would be Thief. Michael Mann's, first cinematic movie I really appreciate, and I think has grown in stature over time. Establishes a genre-defining aesthetic. Has, I think, a very strong and compelling not only performance by James Caan, but a strong man character. Frank, the kind of working class thief. I appreciated the sort of no holds barred way that the narrative goes, which is in the end Frank unable to escape the corruptions of all systems around him, the police system, the criminal system, and just the wider social and political economy of the United States, decides just to blow everything up and kind of walk away on his own. So he's uncompromising in the end. Great. I know you hated the soundtrack. I thought it was a great soundtrack, the Tangerine Dream soundtrack. So position number 3 for me.
I agree. You liked Thief a lot more than I did, but I agree it's number 3.
Okay. All right, good. So now I think things get difficult because Manhunter and Heat, we both really, really liked. What are we going to do here? So you should pick your
my number 2 would be Heat.
Okay.
Which means my number 1 would be
Manhunter. So do you want to explain why you've got them in that order?
Yeah. So I think Heat is a very good movie. But I think that Manhunter, upon rewatching and reconsideration, I think it's both the best movie of the 8 that we watched, and I think it's also the most Michael Mann movie, so to speak, because to my mind, that movie, it pays off. And I think we talked about, or at least I had talked about this a little bit in our pod on Manhunter. It pays off all of Michael Mann's sort of stylistic, aesthetic interests and not tricks, but tendencies or conventions that he engages. And it matches all of those things up perfectly with the story that he's telling. And I think it's a movie that, for me, is very lasting. It really is. It imprints itself on me in a way that I will remember, and that I will return to, and that I will think relatively deeply about moving forward. And so, for those reasons, and as we talked about earlier in the Heat versus Collateral video, I think there's a lot of merit to Heat. I think it's a strong accomplishment, but it doesn't hit me in the same ways that Manhunter does, and I don't see it as compulsively rewatchable.
Okay.
So that would be my sort of takeaway.
All right. So 2 Heat, 1 Manhunter.
Yeah.
Okay. I am going to agree with you. And, I think it is close. I think both movies are real achievements and really important movies. But right at the start of the series, I kept making a distinction in the introduction between, I said, we're trying to find the best Michael Mann movie or maybe the most Michael Mann movie. And these are two different concepts. And I think Heat is the most Michael Mann movie, right? I think it's a lot of movie. It's kind of big. It's a pinnacle point for themes that he established in other movies. But I think maybe because of that, and although he keeps it really well under control, and I think it is very coherent, I think Manhunter is just a little leaner and consequently a little more powerful. And so I think that falls into the category of best. So I think Heat is the most Michael Mann movie and the characteristic pinnacle of a lot of his themes. But Manhunter, just to me, has that extra twist, more interest, efficiency, leanness. I really like in Manhunter the kind of things being right on the edge of the supernatural. I think is really powerful to me. That this is a movie that can and I think movies should do this. We should really reward movies that do this. That they simultaneously exist in a naturalistic setting, a metaphysical setting, but also clearly kind of draw into or draw upon another world that is more abstract, that has hints of the dream, of the supernatural. I think that's why you would have a movie is to tap into and portray those elements of human existence.
You're just sort of, as an audience member, you're on edge the entire time,
right?
In a way that isn't necessarily uncomfortable, or you're not dreading necessarily, but you're just sort of on edge. And maybe that's what it is, because it's working our imaginations in ways that are just off kilter enough to get us engaged, but not so off kilter or so unreasonable that they get us doing things like wondering if, Tom Cruise is wearing a wig, like in Collateral, right? And so that is the kind of, like, there's an unsettling character, is another way I think of saying it, about Manhunter that really sticks the landing. And I do wonder, I think Manhunter has suffered from the Red Dragon movie. And not because Red Dragon is better, but because I think Red Dragon has kind of confused the legacy of Manhunter in a way that's people don't think about Manhunter, or they've sort of forgotten it when they think about Hannibal Lecter and Hannibal Lecter's sort of first appearance. They think of the Red Dragon sort of retconning, right, of that character.
And they're like, that's not Hannibal Lecter. That I know Hannibal. It's Sir Anthony Hopkins. It's Hannibal Lecter. And that is interesting. And I think the Heat has some of those problems of the Sir Anthony Hopkins. That thing of Pacino and De Niro, it so kind of dominates your thoughts when you. And however good I think they both are in that, it's just always in your back of your mind. Like, is there a few moments at which this is a star vehicle rather than a contained movie? Because William Peterson's performance as Will Graham has elements of late period Pacino. Right, there's times he goes to the top. But in the setting, it never quite becomes memeable. Because of, I think, the overall vibe of the movie.
And here maybe it's the neon elements of it, right? It's the slightly off kilter. And so that's why I would say, to me, there is no distinction in this tournament between the best Michael Mann and the most Michael Mann. I think they're both Manhunter.
Okay, yeah. Whereas that's interesting. I do see a slight distinction. All right, good. Very, very worthwhile and interesting thing to do. A new kind of format. First, let us know if you think we were right first about Heat versus Collateral, and then if you think we've got our final four ranking right. Number 4, Last of the Mohicans. Number 3, Thief. Number 2, Heat. And the best Michael Mann movie is Manhunter. Thank you for watching, and on that bombshell,